Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, worshippers of all ages, welcome to YouTube. My name is SeaRaptor, and today we're continuing our first look at the Dutch cruiser branch as we get into the high tiers now, starting with Tier VIII's Haarlem. Now, if you're an American, you might be forgiven for going Harlem. Well, isn't that a suburb in New York or a neighborhood in New York? Well, yes, it is, but you have to remember, if you remember your American history, New York was originally, New Amsterdam was originally a Dutch possession. Harlem was a neighborhood, a Dutch village, I should say, that later became a neighborhood on Manhattan Island. And that particular village was named after the original city in the Netherlands, and that is what Haarlem here is named after. So a little bit of an American link there, I suppose, but there you have it. Haarlem comes to the game as, depending on which way you look at it, the 27th or 28th Tier 8 cruiser in World of Warships. It's a crowded field out there, folks. It's a crowded field. There's a lot of really good Tier 8 cruisers, some in the tech tree, ships like, say, Baltimore, and some premiums, ships like, say, Otago. So she's got a lot of stiff competition, and we're going to have to look around and see what she offers. Keep in mind, guys, remember, I'm allowed to show you stats here in the port. We can look at the armor scheme. We can talk all day we want. Can't show you gameplay. That's Wargaming's rules. It's just the way it is. I'm sorry. I don't make the rules. I just have to live with them. So, as we usually do, we'll start with survivability here, looking at that. Now, I want to make a distinction here. This is where the Dutch tech tree cruiser breaks, okay? Tier 7 and below, these Dutch cruisers have all been light cruisers, 6-inch guns or thereabouts, or, smaller or whatever. Here at Tier 8, Haarlem makes the transition up to a full heavy cruiser. She does have a 203mm or an 8-inch main battery. So we're going to be spending most of our time trying to compare her to, heavy cruisers at Tier 8, simply because it doesn't make much sense to try and compare her to light cruisers at Tier 8, because that's not her contemporaries. So where does she settle in? 40,100 hit points here. When you compare her to the other heavy cruisers in the branch, this is maybe a little on the low side. Not catastrophically so, but Amalfi, Baltimore, Hipper, all have 42,000 hit points and change, right? Hipper itself has almost 44,000. Prince Eugen, a premium, 45,000, right? So you can be a heavy cruiser at this tier and have more HP than this. There are a couple that have less. Of course, Mogami coming in just a shade under 40,000, and then Charles Martel bringing up the rear, 38,000. Technically, Wichita is bringing up the rear, but it's only 100 hit points, and you don't really see too many Wichitas, so I'm not going to sweat that one too badly. But yeah, this is maybe a little on the low side, but it's not awful. The 19% torpedo protection is pretty standard for the tier. There are a whole lot of Tier 8 cruisers that have about this, equal or better in the torpedo protection department. So, but once again, just like we always say, you're in a cruiser, try not to take torpedoes. That's not going to end well for anybody. Armor layout, let's have a check here. 25mm bow, got this 40mm straight coming all the way forward. I got to turn off her torpedo protection to see her belt. 200mm on the belt. This actually makes Haarlem the best protected Tier 8 tech tree heavy cruiser. And honestly, there's an argument. Actually, I think I ran the numbers, expanded it out. She's the best protected Tier 8 cruiser not named Congress. And of course, Congress is currently in testing. She's got that super cruiser, proto-Alaska feel to her, so she's got a better armor scheme than this, as she should. But yeah, there's a lot to like about Haarlem's armor, isn't there? That's kind of nice. Let's turn a few more things off here and have a look at her citadel, just to kind of get a sense of how it looks. Now, one of the things that we've noticed in Dutch ships up to this point, the incredible length of the citadel, right? How many times have we commented that the citadel runs 85% of the overall length of the ship? Haarlem, blessedly, does not suffer from this particular affliction, right? You can see here the citadel does sit quite low in the ship, and it only basically covers, as you would expect, from basically the forward magazine to the aft magazine, and then, of course, the machinery space is here in the middle. So that's nice to see. Let's put that torpedo bulge up here. Does she have a little spacing in here? She does have a little spacing in here. Let's put the casemate back up. Oh, she's even got a little bit of a turtleback going on there. You can kind of see the angle. All right, what's that turtleback plate? Looks like it is 25mm for a turtleback plate there. And let's put that torpedo bulge back up now. Yeah, there we go. So the torpedo bulge actually goes out over the main armor belt of the ship. And then the citadel is well contained within all of this. So from an armor scheme perspective, there's a lot to like here. 30mm of deck armor, 40mm of casemate armor. I mean, you're not going to be shrugging off battleship shells with this. But in a heavy cruiser versus heavy cruiser fight, there's a lot to like here. Now, we talked about the bow. This is not the 27 millimeter bow like you would want to find on a Baltimore, but she does have this 40 millimeter strake. This will give you the opportunity, let's say, to bounce some shells that come at you from bow on, but some will penetrate this upper bow section. So basically, if you're a battleship fighting one of these things bow on, don't aim low, aim high, see if you can get it through up here. Yeah, there's a lot to like here. 50 millimeters back over the steering gear sections here. There's the double twin rudder. Look at that rudder design. That's really interesting. I hadn't noticed that before. So yeah, from a protection standpoint, there's a lot to like about Haarlem. She's fairly well protected for a Tier 8 cruiser. Certainly for a Tier 8 tech tree cruiser. That's kind of nice. Maneuverability and concealment. 32.5 knots, 730 on the turning circle, 11.1 on the rudder shift. So let's start with the speed. 32.5. 32.5 is bad. 32.5 is bad. There's a lot of Tier 8 cruisers, 33, 35. The Japanese in particular love their 35 knot heavy cruisers at this tier. Amalfi 37, Albemarle 33, Cheshire 34. Now I will say 32.5 for the tech tree. Not that outrageous, right? It ties Baltimore, you tie Martel, you basically tie Hipper, which is like a couple of points slower. So this is not outrageous for a tech tree Tier 8 cruiser. But you will notice that she does not reposition as much as well as you might wish. Let's put it that way. There are battleships at this tier that can keep up with her, or potentially in her matchmaking bracket that will outrun her. 730 on the turning circle. Again, not worst in tier, not best in tier. This is not as bad as the Japanese, but let's say not as good as Wichita or Amalfi. She's going to handle okay. My suspicion is, all told, this ship is going to feel like a Hipper. She's got more beam than a Hipper does, I think. Just looking at her, and I'd have to put her side by side to check the beam widths. But just looking at her in port, she feels like she has more beam than a Hipper. But this turning circle, this speed, are gonna feel. She's gonna feel comparable, I think. And the rudder shift time there is actually a little on the slow side. 11.1 is not quite worse than tier, but it's quite bad. So she's going to be a little slow to come around, and when she does, she's going to handle. I feel like she's going to handle a bit like an Admiral Hipper class ship. Surface detection on no camo, nothing, no concealment expert, 12.5. That's your baseline. Again, just like we've been saying for many other things, not best in tier, not worst in tier. This is not Congress. This is not like talking about Hipper or Eugen, right? You can full stealth rig. You can get this ship down to, what did I run the numbers and it landed out about 9.8, which as heavy cruisers go is not too shabby, right? I mean, again, she's not Baltimore, but that's actually better than Baltimore. It's a little worse than Mogami. It's a little worse than Otago, but it's pretty competitive. So from a stealth perspective, that's quite nice. Now, one place she absolutely fails: aerial detection. Aerial detection. This is Haarlem is the easiest Tier 8 cruiser to spot from the air, other than USS Congress, right? And this is it's a huge margin too. A full stealth rig Haarlem still has an aerial detection of over 7 kilometers. And her AA bubble, as we'll see in a minute, is only 5.8. So this is, most Tier 8 cruisers have an AA bubble and an aerial detection that match each other, right? In other words, if you're detected by planes, your AA is shooting back at them. Haarlem does not suffer this problem. She can be spotted on the surface by opposing planes, spotted from the air by opposing aircraft without being able to defend herself. That feels bad. That feels kind of bad. And I think we'll see why in a bit when we start looking at her A defenses and her consumables. I think you'll understand some of the logic behind that choice. So with all of these, we've looked at the hull, we've looked at the survivability. What are we bringing to the table? Well, as we noted earlier, Haarlem is a heavy cruiser. There are 3 of these triple-barreled turrets. Now, these are very German-looking turrets. In fact, these are very German-looking guns, aren't they, kids? I think where Wargaming is going here, even the shells have got German names. I think where Wargaming is going is the assumption that had war not necessarily broken out, or had naval development continued with, let's make the assumption that Germany and the Netherlands had become friends or collaborated, this ship might have resulted, because these are very, very German turrets and guns. 203 millimeters, of course, 15-second reload. That's not too shabby. Obviously, we're not looking at best in tier numbers, but we're not looking at worst in tier numbers. In fact, when you take those shell values, 2850 HE, 4800 AP. You multiply them by the number of barrels, multiply that out by the reload speed. You get a high a DPM number that is very competitive for this tier. She is not, again, she is not worst in tier on the HE. She's actually a little behind. Okay. I was looking at the wrong row. I apologize. She's not worst in tier. Cheshire exists. Congress exists. But her HE DPM is actually on the low side. My apologies. I was incorrect. So her HE DPM is actually a little below that of Hipper because she reloads a little slower. Well, she reloads a lot slower than Hipper, but she does have more barrels, okay? Her AP DPM is actually not too shabby. It's fairly competitive because these AP shells are actually hit a little harder than of those of, say, Baltimore. They actually hit almost as hard as Hipper's do herself, and of course she brings more barrels. So this is kind of nice. I actually want to check something real quick. Let's, these are 60 S6. I think my brain tells me those are rune guns or rune turrets. Let's have a look at this. Let's see if my brain is lying to me. Nope. My brain is not lying to me, ladies and gentlemen. The guns on Haarlem are basically rune turrets and rune guns. Looks like more or less the same. It's not the same range, but certainly much of the same ballistics. Let's have a look at this a little closer. All right, so we've got this. It's got the same designation. The shell designations are the same. Of course, the values are all different. Okay, so now let's pull Haarlem back up again here. That's really interesting. So the shells behave the same. Yeah, so these are basically rune guns. You're getting rune guns at Tier 8. That's kind of nice. That's actually quite lovely. I like the guns on rune. And this turret arrangement is better. Now, you're not getting rune's reload. This reload is like a full 50% slower almost. And you're not getting the shell damage is different. And you're certainly not getting a range. The range is actually one thing that is noteworthy kind of bad here. 15.6 kilometers, right? That is really, really not good. You kind of want a Tier 8 heavy cruiser to be in that 17 plus range, right? Congress has this kind of range, Martel, Hipper, but there's a lot of other Tier 8 heavy cruisers that have this range, like the overwhelming majority of them, Amalfi, Baltimore, and so on. But the reason that Hipper and Eugen and those kind of ships play as comfortably as they do is because that extra 2 kilometers gives them more options, gives them more ability to play at range, to dodge around, to play rudder and throttle games to avoid incoming fire. Haarlem's going to struggle a little more with that. She doesn't have that kind of range, so you're going to have to play this ship a little more cautiously. But the guns, that's interesting. So basically, these are rune guns. Okay, noteworthy. When you look at the dispersion circle and you compare it to her range and everything, kind of bad, honestly. Kind of bad. That dispersion ellipse, you see there 179 meters at this kind of range, absolutely worst in tier for guns with this range. Most heavy cruisers in this tier bracket that have got a range, 15 and a half or so, you're looking at about 140 meter dispersion circle. Haarlem's guns are simply less accurate than that. And that's going to feel bad. This is one that you're probably going to want to put that accuracy mod on. I'm almost of the opinion this is something that might get changed during testing. I actually kind of hope it does. For a ship that really doesn't bring the utility, like her big utility gimmick is the airstrike, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I don't like that. I don't like seeing that dispersion number as bad as it is. I kind of think they need to do better. But we'll see how she survives testing. Let's talk about A defense and consumables, and we'll come back to we'll hit the airstrikes towards the end. A defense. For the first time, ladies and gentlemen, a Dutch cruiser has a long-range outer bubble with flak. That's right. Welcome to Tier 8, where you finally have flak puffs. These are fairly typical of Tier 8. I put up five flak puffs at 6 kilometers. Continuous damage in that outer bubble is actually really good. I mean, look at that. 123 DPS. That's pretty sexy. If I look at that, I'm trying, is that best in tier? It's not best in tier. But it's pretty close. Actually, yeah, it's actually really, really good. Cheshire beats this out, but I mean, that's not too shabby. So her long-range bubble, actually quite good. Mid-range aura, not as good. Not as good. She simply doesn't pack as many of the Bofors as some of the other ships in the line, and then she backs that up with some 20 millimeter mounts, of course. As you get into the inner ring here, we'll have a look at those. Yeah, she's got some of these around. Here are those Bofors mounts. She just doesn't have as many of these as some of her contemporaries. So she does have defensive fire. We'll point that out in a minute. So that's nice. Her A, I think, is going to feel comfortable. By the time you run the numbers and kind of compare and contrast her to other ships in the tier, certainly heavy cruisers in the tier, I mean, she has about the same AA power as, say, an Albemarle. It's going to feel very comparable to Albemarle, in my opinion. Now, Albemarle's AA, honestly, feels quite good. Feels quite good when you play that ship. So if that's the comparison level, if that's where she stays, I think that's going to be pretty nice. She's not Baltimore. Baltimore, I think, probably still runs away with the best in tier AA here when we're talking about heavy cruisers. Baltimore or Cheshire, kind of a toss-up. But Haarlem definitely on the high end when it comes to AA defense. That's going to feel nice. Quick look at consumables. We'll point out that, yes, she does have defensive fire. Talked about that a second ago, so that's noteworthy. Of course, as a ship as mortar warships, she gets damage control party. Lacking aircraft facilities, they've opted to give her 5-kilometer hydro instead, which I like, actually. These two things start to give more of the utility that some of the other Dutch cruisers up to this point have kind of lacked, right? So you get hydro and defensive fire like baked into the ship. That's really nice. And in the tech tree, you get a heal. That's really interesting. There aren't many tech tree heavy cruisers with a heal. In fact, I think it's just Albemarle and Edinburgh. There might be one that I'm missing. I know in the premium realm you get some, right? Of course, Cheshire, Otago, Prince Eugen, that kind of thing. Congress, I'm pretty sure, has a heal. But, like, this is nice. Now, this is a standard heal. This is not the crazy British cruiser heal that they get. So that's noteworthy. But it's just nice that she gives this. This is going to give her a little longevity. When you pair up the what amounts to more or less kind of best in tier belt armor of a quite stout armor scheme with this heal, a well-played Haarlem is the kind of ship that can really hang in a match. I'm really curious to try this, right? One of the things that I've always loved about Eugen, for example, is it's got that German survivability, the armor scheme, the heal, Eugen is just a hard ship to put off the board. As I look at Haarlem, I kind of get a sense that she might be similar. And I like the look of that. Now, let's talk airstrikes. Of course, she does have the Dutch airstrike ability you see here. She has 2 available flights. They put up 10 planes each. Each plane drops 6 bombs. You can see there the damage and so on. Now, I finally sat down. They've been making some tweaks to this, all right? So I'm going to put a little graph up here, and you can see the progression of the airstrike damage as we head up the tiers. Hang on a minute. I've got to get my own little spreadsheet kind of arranged here to show everything. Give me a moment. But the bottom line is that there's now a nice progression of airstrike damage as you head up the tiers. Here we go. All right, so let's talk about this for a minute. So basically down at Eendracht at tier 7, we put up 1 flight, 8 planes, 6 bombs. So you're putting 48 bombs into the reticle. Those bombs had these exact same damage, penetration, and fire chance numbers. Now, Haarlem is now putting up 2 flights of 10 planes each on a longer cooldown. You see there the cooldown is 100 seconds. Down at tier 8, down at tier 7, Eendracht is a 80-second cooldown. So these planes don't regenerate quite as quickly. But the strike itself hits significantly harder. In fact, Haarlem here has double the DPM, the airstrike potential of Eendracht, because she can put up 2 flights on top of each other. So again, I feel like this airstrike ability is something that's really going to punish, again, bow on, stationary, slow moving battleships in your tier matchmaking. Things that are all, people that like to park their North Carolina or, God forbid, their Nelson. Imagine these bombs falling on a Nelson, which already has somewhat questionable deck armor. And now you're full pinning him and lighting him on fire with HEs. He's going to feel that, right? Like, he's absolutely going to feel that. The Iowas of the world, that kind of thing. There are battleships in her matchmaking bracket. Of course, she's tier 8. She will see tier 10 ships that will shrug off this kind of damage. 34 millimeters of penetration will not get through the deck armor of every battleship in her matchmaking spread. But there are a non-zero number of ones that it will, and they will feel it, and it will feel bad. It will feel very, very bad. So, yeah, she's got a lot more potential damage coming out of the airstrike than she did at tier 7. Things definitely starting to ramp up here. So that's just kind of noteworthy. Keep that in the back of your mind when you start seeing these in a match. So, yeah, that's our first look at Haarlem. I think I covered just about everything important there. I like the look of this ship. The airstrike thing to me is still kind of, I don't really know. I'm not totally sold on this concept yet. We're going to have to see how these numbers finally land. They're still making some tweaks here. You saw the tables. You can kind of see the progression between the different ships and everything that have it. But yeah, definitely ramps up here at Tier 8. At Tier 6 and 7, the airstrike thing is kind of, that's neat. At Tier 8 and Tier 9 and Tier 10, it's like, whoa, this is a problem, right? Like if you're not careful, you can really get wrecked by those things. So we'll see how they continue to tweak that through testing. In the meantime, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Wash your hands, be safe, and I'll catch you next time.